Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel. Today, talking about books that I read in 2023 that were pretty good. The idea for this video came from, I just finished a book that I thought was pretty good, but I didn't have a lot to say about it in terms of doing a full review on the channel. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about a lot of different titles, stuff that I haven't mentioned in previous videos other than my wrap-ups. And what I mean by these books being pretty good is that they're not great, they're not, 5 stars, they're not 10 out of 10, but they're by no means bad. And in fact, I do recommend all of these books, but they're just, they're pretty good. You'll get something out of them, and you may even enjoy them even more than I did. So I'll start this list. I've got 6 books here, and of these, only one of them is one that I've done a dedicated video on before. We'll get to that. But I want to start with the book that inspired this video, and that's House of Shadows by Darcy Coates. I read From Below by Darcy Coates earlier this year. I absolutely loved it. I have a review where I rave about it, which I recommend checking that out. This is the first book I've read from her since reading that one. That was my first Darcy Coates book. So this one is a haunted house kind of story, which from what I understand is like her niche. Like she does a ton of haunted house kind of books. So House of Shadows is, I guess, set like sometime in the 1800s. Main character is Sophie. I can't remember her last name, even though I just finished the book a moment ago. Hemlock. It's Hemlock. Sophie Hemlock, who marries a rich, slightly older man. She's about 20 years old herself. Kind of out of necessity. He kind of becomes, if there's a weird attachment that he feels to her after a very brief meeting at like an opera. And she feels obligated to accept the marriage invitation, the marriage offer, because her family has found itself in a situation where they are basically going to be destitute. So this guy, Joseph Argenton, is very wealthy, and he can basically make their money problems go away. She's just got to, marry him and move to his estate that's called Northwood. And when she gets there, Northwood is, as it always turns out to be the case, very, very haunted. He's got an aunt and an uncle and a cousin who are like all really weird and cold and distant. And Joseph himself is very cold and distant at first. So it's a kind of a lot of cliche setup, but there's enough kind of fresh ideas in here to make this a pretty fun story. I was really surprised at the romance in this working really well. I didn't expect a romantic book. Nowhere near this level, but I did kind of get Jane Eyre vibes from this, like Jane Eyre in Rochester. I think the time period certainly helped that as well. And I think the romance does work pretty well. The horror also works pretty well. It's nothing that's going to really terrify you. But again, there's, cliches of, blood dripping from the walls, pianos that play themselves. So it's nothing super new, but just the idea and the presentation here is well done. So this book was pretty good. But again, nothing to not enough content there to make like a full video about it. So I enjoyed House of Shadows. Pretty much every book on this list I would give like a 7 out of 10. So, do with that what you will. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Case Against Satan by Ray Russell. So I talked briefly about this in a previous wrap-up video. This is an Exorcist book that was written before The Exorcist. I think it was like 10 years before William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. And in this one, it also is about a young girl, this one named Susan, who is showing signs of demonic possession. And the book is about the priest and the bishop who kind of identify what is going on and decide to perform the exorcism. And it's that the story of her kind of being held at the rectory while they perform the exorcism, while outside people who don't understand what's going on unknowingly kind of affect the events that are occurring. And it was it was a pretty good book. It's gonna get compared to Blatty's The Exorcist. There's no way around it, and that's unfortunate because The Exorcist is a lot more detailed of a book, I would say. There's a lot more preamble where there's we see in that story Reagan, the possessed girl, going through a ton of different procedures before the exorcism to try to find something that's just like medically identifiably wrong with her and just nothing working. Whereas in this book, in the case against Satan, it's like the first thing. Like we're introduced to the girl, and then within a couple dozen pages, we've started the exorcism. Like we've decided, yeah, this is going to be the course of action to go. So there's a lot less going on in this one. It's a lot more streamlined of a book, but it still works really, really well. And I recommend it. It was pretty good. Next up is Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. Uh, this is the second book I read by her this year. I really enjoyed Mexican Gothic quite a bit. Silver Nitrate is a new release. It's her book that came out this year, and I really should have. I felt enjoyed it a lot more than I did. I really wanted to love it because I am, a film lover. Kind of first and foremost, I liked film. You know, I won't say before I liked books, but I loved film before I loved books. And this is a book about a sound engineer who, well, what was her name? Montserrat. Steel trap up here. Montserrat, who was a sound engineer, sound mixer for TV and film, who, along with her childhood best friend, who is a washed up soap opera actor, befriend an old horror movie director, like this cult guy that they adore. And they become involved in his kind of request to finish a notoriously unfinished cursed film that he started. And Silver Nitrate is about them becoming more and more embroiled in that and discovering this world of like wizardry and stuff like that. I mean, when I say wizardry, don't think it's as whimsical as like Harry Potter. It's a lot more grounded type of stuff, but definitely supernatural aspects do come in, and it's a really solid book. And I really like the main character. I like the premise, and it read really easily. But in the end, I didn't find it like extremely. I didn't find it great. It was pretty good. That's the purpose of this list. This is a pretty good book. All right, this next one is a novella that I read during Garb August. It was a book written by a celebrity, and it was a lot better than I expected it to be. It's called The Reservoir, and it's by David Duchovny. This was a COVID book. I think it was written during COVID, and it's very much about COVID. It's about like this retired Wall Street guy who lives in Manhattan in a high rise, and it's like during quarantine, and he has like right like in the middle of like quarantine at its height. So not a lot of encounters with the outside world anymore. Kind of not even speaking to his like family much anymore. So he's getting very restless and kind of getting cabin fever. And he, in the middle of the night, sees what he interprets as not necessarily a call for help, but like a signal, a message from someone else in one of the other buildings. They're flashing their lights at certain intervals, and he becomes obsessed with it. And he decides that he has to go find that person because they're trying to reach him specifically. And so the book is him trying to reach that person, and it just becomes more and more of like a fever dream as he goes like into Manhattan and like Central Park. And I mean, it could very easily have gotten into pretentious territory, particularly because it's being written by a celebrity. And you know, they have a tendency to be kind of full of themselves. But I was really surprised that David Duchovny can write a very good book. um, it was a bit flowery in the prose, which I don't usually like, but it read very easily, and it never really turned me off. I never felt like I was being spoken down to, or he was being like highfalutin. It was just well written. It was just a very nicely orchestrated book, and a very short one as well. I think I read it in like one day or like a couple hours. So, The Reservoir by David Duchovny, a pretty good book. Next up, this is the book that I did do a full review on, so I'll try to keep my thoughts somewhat short. But Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. This is another one I really expected to like a lot more than I did. I expected to really love this one because this book gets compared a lot to Stephen King's It, which after reading this, I think is an unfair comparison, especially because Stephen King's It is like the pinnacle of kids on bikes in like a period piece fighting a great danger in a town, in a small town. You're never really going to hit that height. But Summer of Night is very distinct from Stephen King's It. It's a lot more slow burn. It's a lot more low key. There's no big spooky clown in this one. The danger is a lot more, I would say, abstract than in It, but no less dangerous. Like this was a book that was kind of losing me, honestly, until like almost the exact halfway point when something really shocking happened. And then it hooked me in and it kept me going for the rest of it. And then it ended up being, in my opinion, a pretty good book. I know a lot of people would call this a great book. I don't know if it's quite great for me, especially now that some time has passed between it. I think back on it, I did like it, but I didn't love it. But I think it is still worth reading, but only if you can endure a very slow burn. And finally, this is another book that I read this month. It's actually the book that I finished before House of Shadows. So this was two pretty good books in a row. And that is Audition by Ryu Murakami. I have been trying to kind of familiarize myself with J-horror, particularly the stuff that caused the movie craze in the 90s. You know, J-horror in the 90s became really big in the US with The Ring and The Grudge, and Audition was one of those movies that I still have to see myself. So I wanted to read the book. I wanted to read the book before I saw the movie because Ring by Koji Suzuki, I didn't really enjoy that book anywhere near as much as I probably would have had I not seen the movie first. Because I think the movie, The Ring, the American one in particular, is way better than the book. I think the Ring movie really perfected the idea, and the Ring book just kind of came across as very quaint. And so maybe that book could have even made this list, but I think Audition's a better book than Ring. Even though, again, I think it kind of falls into that quaint territory. So Audition is about a widower, a Yoma, who has decided to start dating again. And the way that he goes about dating is he doesn't want to have to like sift through, or he doesn't want to, do trial and error of just random dates. He has a friend with a production company who holds auditions for basically a fake movie. And so he auditions women for this lead role in this fake movie, but really what's happening is Aoma is auditioning these women to be his next wife. It almost has a rom-com setup. I mean, it's kind of skeevy and weird, but you can kind of see it going in that direction. And he ends up falling in love with this girl, Yamasaki. And we just get hints throughout the book that she is maybe too good to be true, not quite what she seems. I'm not going to give a lot away because this is similar to Ring. The last scene in the book is the scary scene. Everything preceding it is all just set up to like kind of give you clues and set up of like what's going to happen, and then it happens, and then the book's done. So it's like it's in and out real quick. I'm really curious to see how they do it in the movie. But the book itself is perfectly serviceable. Pretty good book. There's a lot that I really enjoyed about it. It read very quickly, very easily. I didn't feel like it didn't meander in any way. I just wish that maybe there was a little bit more to it. Like I said, it ends when it ends. You know, there's nothing really beyond that climactic scene, which it's like that's what the whole book is just about, really. Which I know makes sense. But yeah, Audition by Ryu Murakami, a pretty good book. So that's it for this list. If you've read any books this year that you felt were pretty good, let me know about them in the comments below. And if you've read any of these books that I describe as pretty good, let me know if you agree or if I'm off base, if they were great in your opinion, or if they weren't even pretty good at all. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.